Hi, it has been quite some time. I think like 2 or 3 months. The last video I uploaded was in June, and that was a writing vlog in which I think I'm working on Storm Cloud. And some stuff has happened since then in my personal life, both sort of at the opposite ends of the spectrum. Like one of the best things in life, I think, and then also one of the worst things in life. I got married. So I am a married woman, darling. That's like the best thing that's happened, I think, in the last couple of months is getting married. It was literally like we woke up that morning, no concept of what the day was going to become. And then at like 2 o'clock, my now husband texts his father like, hey, I'm getting married today. Because we had literally just decided like a few minutes before that we were going to do it. So it was very impromptu. And it was like the best thing ever. His parents were there and my mom was on video chat, and for my dad, he was in a completely different time zone, so we recorded the wedding, the little ceremony at our local courthouse, and so we sent it to them so they could watch it. In Massachusetts, you have to wait at least 3 days before you can actually get married, but we were on a time crunch. Like 3 days later we were going to be on a plane. We just did not have the time, and so we got a waiver. We went to before a judge, and we talked to him about the situation, and these people were like the nicest people at the courthouse, and then at the city hall or the city clerk's office, the nicest people ever. The justice of the peace who married us, she was the nicest woman ever. Honestly, it was just like such a whirlwind day. And then literally after that we had to go get a COVID test because we needed one to travel. And then we had dinner with his parents, and I had crab legs for the first time in so long, because up here it's all about lobsters. And I had this beautiful bouquet of flowers. My sister-in-law got them for me, and honestly it was just the greatest thing. And it's so funny because I'm wearing I'll show you. So I have this ring, like this is my engagement ring, the bottom one, and the top one is a ring my grandma gave my mom, and she gave it to me. And so I just happened to be wearing it that day on this finger, but we had it was so impromptu, we completely forgot to even think about wedding rings, and so I just happened to be wearing that ring on this finger. But then when we got to the ceremony, they're like, you have rings, and I'm like, oh crap. We forgot rings. And so I just happened to be wearing a ring that fits perfectly on this finger. So until we get our actual wedding rings, which we just got my husband's finger size yesterday, until we get our actual wedding rings, this is what I'm wearing as my wedding ring. So that's nice. I have like a bit of my mom and my grandma in that as well. And then my husband was wearing his father's wedding ring, but he's since given it back. Gosh, that was a big old tangent. And then the other thing that happened, that at the opposite end of the spectrum, my father, not to go into it really, but so my dad passed away. He had cancer, and we basically got to where he lives, and then less than 2 days later he passed away. So we got there in the nick of time, and I'm glad we were able to be with him. But yeah, so that's been a really tough time, because ever since then I've been dealing with his affairs and stuff, and gosh, I never knew how much like paperwork and phone calls and just documents, like everything, like there's so much that you have to do when someone dies, and they don't tell you this, they don't teach you this anywhere, and I've never had to deal with this before. So the long and short of it is, it's been a crazy last 2 months, some of the best and worst days of my life. And yeah, I've started seeing a therapist. I had my first session with her on Wednesday. Today is Monday. And we scheduled a follow-up session for the next day. This is not supposed to be like a life update video so much as like a writing update video, but I kind of feel like some of the stuff that's happened recently fits into like, the sun is like right on my face. It's like coming around the mountain. It's coming around to its peak. Oh, and we moved to a new apartment because as soon as we got back in town, our lease was up a week later, and we already had been planning to move, but then we sort of had to drop everything to go be with my dad. And then when we came back, we were supposed to move to one apartment, but then as it turned out, that apartment fell through for reasons, and we were just like, well, where are we going to live? We have less than a week before we have to move. The movers were already scheduled to come and move our stuff, and so we ended up just staying in the same apartment complex, but moving to a different apartment. because they had already rented out our unit to somebody else, which, like, can't blame them. We had already told them like 2 months before we were not going to be staying. So we have a gorgeous view. Sorry if the camera's at a different angle. And the sun is directly kind of right on me, which is beautiful to sit here on this chair and get sunlight. Okay, anyway, writing, right? Like creative writing. In the last month or two, even with everything going on with my dad, like, it was I didn't think about writing at all for like a few weeks straight, except once or twice to realize that I hadn't thought about writing, because normally writing is something that just occupies a good lot of my brain space. Even if I'm not writing, I'm thinking about writing. But when everything was happening, like, I wasn't thinking about writing like at all. And at one point I kind of just realized, like, I need to start writing again, even if I don't feel like it. You know, I think it's something that I need to do, even if it's just like for cathartic reasons, even if it's just to take my mind out of this world for a few minutes and just think about something else that has nothing to do with me. Because, you know, when your own life is not great, like, turning to a fictional world that you created can be like, I think it was very therapeutic and very good for me to do that, and it definitely helped me to process things, even if I did so by not processing things, if that makes sense. So while we were there, I started to work on my creative writing in my free time. I started to revise Ship Story. So the thing that I've been feeling basically all summer has been that I am just, I mean, you know, if you've watched my videos for a few years, you know that I have been working on my Ship Story, which is Pitchfork, and I have been working on Stormcloud for so many years. I have been working on Stormcloud since 2009, and I've been working on Pitchfork, I think, since 2014, if not 2013, but I think it's 2014. So with both of these stories, they've just gone through so much, and I've gone like round and round in circles with them, just revising them, writing new drafts, changing this, changing that, sometimes changing things for the sake of change, even if it really didn't need to be changed. And it's just been like this Sisyphean cycle. You know, you roll the boulder up the hill, then it rolls back down, and you have to roll it up again. And it just sometimes feels like nothing is happening in my writing. I feel like I've not had as much of an opportunity to really grow in some ways, and to give myself the opportunity to conceive ideas from scratch, instead of just going back to old stories written by an old, like, a younger version of Sydney, who is obviously not here with us anymore because she has grown and changed and become somebody a little bit different. Like, she's still the same in some ways, but she's very different in other ways, and she wants to be able to express herself in new ways and not just keep reverting back to the past and, you know, trying to fix something that she's already moved on from. Do you know what I mean? So, like, basically what I'm trying to say is I'm sick of working on Stormcloud and Pitchfork. But at the same time, I can't completely let them go without getting them to a place where I'm happy with them. Do you know what I mean? So what I've been working on the last, I don't know, month, has been working on Pitchfork and just reading through the draft and making some kind of bare bones changes. Like, instead of like completely revolutionizing things, just getting it to a point where it makes sense from point A to point Z, and what is the very minimum I can do to get it there. Do you know? So instead of like implementing this instead of like changing this entire plot point or introducing this entire plot point, just kind of leave it where it is, make some changes that are necessary to make that make sense. But ultimately the story, like, I honestly believe the story is in a great place. I really do. But I just, like, when you kind of just get sick of working on the same story again, you find yourself conceiving like of these whole new plots that to like just shake things up in your story, even if it wouldn't necessarily make the story better. You just need it to be different, you know what I mean? But it's also, you need it to be familiar, so you stay within these same stories instead of thinking of new stories. So I've decided not to move forward with a certain plot point I was going to do. It's not necessary anyway. It just would have been sort of, it would have just been a different take on the same story, kind of. And so I'm just basically combing through it, loosening out the knots gently, and I forget exactly where I am in the story, but I'm like, there's 63 chapters, and I'm like 40, I think I'm on chapter 44 or 45. So, but that translates page wise to like, I still have like maybe 200 pages left of a 550 plus page book. So it's total 115,000 words. I'm not exactly sure where I am word count wise, but basically I'm like 3/5 of the way, like 60% of the way through the story. That was a lot of numbers for you. So, and I'm feeling really good about it. I kind of tend to work on it on average like 3 or 4 times a week, working on anywhere between 1 and 4 chapters in a giving writing period, just depending on how much work needs to be done with these chapters and also how short or long the chapters are. On Saturday, I went to a cafe that I've only been to once ever, and I haven't been to it in like 2 years. Sometimes it's just like, there's really no good reason why I don't go back to certain cafes. And I was there for probably like 2 hours and some change. And it was really nice. Like, it was a nice drive there. There's a lot of trees on the drive there. It was on a street where, like, almost kind of like a main street. A lot of people my age and like kind of younger, like millennial Gen Z generation, like just hanging out with their friends, going to grab coffee. The coffee shop was like, they were doing really well business wise. There's a lot of people coming in and going out. I was lucky at all to get a table because there were all of like 5 tables there. And I got a table with an outlet. I got me a London Fog tea, which is exactly what I got the last time I went there, and it was really good. It's like an Earl Grey tea, but it's a latte, so it's a tea latte. There's no coffee in it because I don't even like coffee. Ooh, there was even like a Mediterranean restaurant there, and I recently realized in the last few months that Mediterranean food and Indian food are my favorite foods. It makes my taste buds sing, and it makes my stomach feel so good. Man. I love it so much. Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't even know what this is. What am I talking about? I was talking about the ship story, and now I'm talking about food, Indian food. Okay, so I'm working on Pitchfork. Um, and then I don't know what I'm going to do about Stormcloud yet. Stormcloud, it's not as easy to just kind of loosely comb through and fix stuff and then move on. When I was working on it in June, I was kind of changing things quite a bit, but since then, one of the reasons I stopped working on it was because I realized that I still wasn't moving forward in that story in the way that I needed to. And so I'm trying to take lessons I'm learning from this draft of Pitchfork and applying it to Stormcloud. So what is the bare minimum that I can do to get this story in a good place? But I don't know. I'm not really in a Stormcloud headspace right now, so I haven't thought about it a lot, and I also don't want to think about it too much because then I'm going to lose my momentum with Pitchfork and want to switch to that, and that's not what we need right now. But the other project is Hotel Story. So Hotel Story is a relatively new project. She's reaching her terrible twos. I started her in October 2019, and so we're almost to that point where, with fall on the horizon, that is the story that I probably am going to want to start working on as soon as the leaves start changing and as soon as it starts getting cold enough and overcast enough for me to want to be in the fall spirit. Like, I'm going to want to go back to Hotel Story. So I'm trying my darndest to finish this draft of Pitchfork before, like, say the end of the month, which gives me like a week and a half, okay? Because today is September 20th. Is it? Yeah, today's September 20th, so that really doesn't give me much time. I think I could possibly do it, but right now the chapter that I'm working on requires me to change the location of a scene from one country to a different country. So with that, I have to do some research into what this location looks like and what kind of the vibe of it is, so I can revise this chapter with that in mind and change some details and stuff. And so it's just like the one scene that takes place here, but I still have to make these changes. I think I'm going to work on it today. Okay, the other big thing. So I am 26 years old. I have been writing for probably since, I think, 8th grade, really, is when I really started to get into writing. You change a lot as a writer. I've changed a lot as a writer in that time. And, you know, when you change as a person, sometimes you try to, sometimes you don't even realize how you've changed, or sometimes it doesn't feel like you've changed for the better in some ways. And I feel like with writing, there are some ways in which I have just changed for the worse. And I think a lot of that is just like, I used to be less anxious about writing. I used to be less anxious about my productivity and my output. I used to not worry as much about what my future was going to be as a writer. Like, I wanted to be published, but I wasn't stressing about it so much. And also there was a lot less going on in life. Like, all I really had was school, and you come home, you do your homework, and then you spend some time writing, or maybe you spend some time watching TV. But now, like, I have a full-time job. I have a husband that I live with, so I don't live by myself anymore. My free time is divided very differently than it was, and I'm still honestly trying to figure out how to get to a point where I feel good about the time I can devote to writing, and it just makes sense. So like, going to cafes is really important, but a lot of the time when I have free time, I can't always go to a cafe because the cafe is not open. My productivity is not what it once was, and it hasn't been that way since, honestly, since I moved to Massachusetts. And I don't know if it's just like Massachusetts just doesn't vibe with me so well, or if it's because my life completely changed when I moved here. Like, I was a single girl who had to take care of all the bills on my own and all that stuff, and there was just a lot of stuff that came with that, having a full-time job, you know. And it was different from before that, where I only really had to worry about school. I didn't have to worry about having a full-time job or paying bills and stuff. So now there's just different things to worry about, different things occupying my brain space. And sometimes you come home from a long day of work and the last thing you want to do is stare at a computer again, because you were just doing that for 8 hours, and you had like 2 hours of commute time that you were doing that day, and you woke up really early, and all you want to do is zone out and stare at your TV and not think about anything. You don't want to like do more work necessarily. So I'm just a different writer than I once was, and I think that for the last 2 years maybe, I've been trying to get that old writer back. But like, she can't come to the phone right now. She's dead. You know what I mean? She can't come to the phone right now. She has evolved and changed into a different person. She doesn't exist anymore. And that is okay. That's actually a good thing, believe it or not, Sydney. It's okay to change and become a different person. It's no longer about trying to recapture the past magic, you know. It's about trying to reinvent the future. Who am I going to be as a writer? Not who was I as a writer. And so that's definitely a work in progress, and part of that is it requires me to change my mindset on who I am as a writer and what writing is to me and all that stuff, and to just start from scratch instead of trying to revisit stuff. So that's why I really want to just get these stories to a good place so I can move on from them. What moving on means to me is I might try querying them, might try publishing them, but the point is I need to get it out of my hands, you know, put it in someone else's hands, or go to like Hotel Story, or create new ideas and just move on, create new projects, you know. And so I'm lucky in that writing is not my full-time job so much, where it's not like something I depend on to pay the bills, you know what I mean? Like, I'm purely doing it as a hobby, as a pastime, as a passion, yes, but it's not paying my bills right now. And so with that, there's not the pressure to produce, you know. That's a different kind of pressure, I imagine. And so yeah, that is where I am with life. I will say I do feel very burned out with life. Like, so much has happened that I've really been taking time to relax when I can, because there's always another person to call about my dad's stuff. There's always another form to fill out, and boy, are we only really just getting started. Man, you know. Anyway, so that was a long and rambly chat. I'm gonna let the sun back in because I miss her. Wow. She is right there. Thank you so much for watching this video. I mean, with not focusing on writing as my main thing, YouTube has fallen by the wayside. I've recently gone back and watched a couple of my past videos, and with the fall coming around, I just feel, you know, it's so funny because autumn in nature is sort of a time of things sort of winding down. Some things die, some things reach the end of their life cycle, some things kind of get ready for the winter to hibernate and put pause on stuff before, you know, before their rebirth in the spring. But for me, it feels like the opposite, where fall is the time of rebirth for me. And that's what, at least, that feels especially true this year. And I feel with sort of the pressure waning from the crazy month that was August, it feels like I can finally sort of get back to who I am. It feels like I can finally start devoting more attention to writing, going to cafes, just dedicating that time. I finally feel like I can get back to who I am, because I don't think I've really been myself so much the last couple of months, which is okay. But it feels nice to be coming back home. So thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you next time. Toodaloo.